Hey everyone, so today we are doing a video that I've been wanting to do for a long time, and it's about cast iron skillets, or cooking on cast iron. I did a video using this very pan and another smaller version of this pan. Now it's got hundreds of thousands of views and lots of comments and opinions about what I said in that video. So I thought, I want to do a follow-up video to that and just talk about all of the facts and sort of myths and misconceptions about cooking on cast iron. Because there's still way too many people out there misinformed, using bad old information, or just afraid to cook on cast iron because of the misinformation out there. When I first started getting into cooking, I never expected there would be so much controversy and so many different opinions on how to use a pan. Seems like a pretty simple tool. You just heat it up and put stuff in it, right? Well, when it comes to cast iron, there are a plethora of opinions, myths, facts, truth, partial truths. So with that, let's get started. It's just not true. It's not difficult to maintain. I have here probably one of the easiest pans to maintain, and that is a ceramic nonstick pan. Cast iron pan, I do two extra things to this pan that I don't always do with this pan. The one extra thing I always do on this pan is I dry it off after washing it. You cannot leave your cast iron pan out to dry. I mean, I guess you can, but you run the risk of it rusting, and it's just not worth it. Now, the other thing that I do to this pan, not every time, I would say at least half the time, maybe a little bit more, is I put a light coating of oil after I'm done washing it and drying it. And then sometimes, not always, I'll put it on the burner on high until it just starts to smoke. And then I'll slide it off, shut the burner off, and then it cools on its own and I walk away and don't worry about it. So, not hard to maintain. So, do you need to oil it after every single use? Well, the recommendation is yes. It's a safe way to prevent it from rusting. It's a good way to guarantee that you're kind of constantly going to maintain that nonstick surface once you've built it up. So why don't I oil it after every use? Well, sometimes it's just laziness. I just have too many things I want to do, so I just dry it off and think, well, I'll just oil it before my next use. The other reason is I live in Arizona, very dry air here, so humidity and kind of moisture buildup is not something we worry about. It also depends on what I cook. So if I'm cooking something that uses, like an avocado oil or canola oil or some other oil that normally you use to do the seasoning, then after I wash it and dry it, I look at it and I say, does it look bone dry like a desert, or does it have a nice non-stick look to it? And as long as it maintains this nice sort of non-stick look, then I'm good to go and I don't oil it. So bottom line is, cast iron pan is only a tiny bit more work, but the benefits are worth it for particular things that you cook. You can't use metal utensils on a cast iron pan. So I have here two spatulas. One is plastic, one is metal. Guess what? And I'm pushing on that thing, right? Well, look at my pan. Nothing. But this, I use metal utensils on here all the time. These pans are pretty much indestructible as far as, damaging the surface of the pan. But people worry, well, am I going to scrape off this non-stick coating that I've been working so hard on building up? And the answer is no. That oil gets, if you're doing it right, gets polymerized on here, and it creates a very durable surface that is, you can't just scrape it off. It's like microscopic molecule size layers. It's not going to be scraped off with even with an edge like a spatula. Now, what you may see when you're scraping your pan is you may see some carbonized food that was stuck to your pan that maybe you didn't wash off. Like if I just put this in the light just right, I might see one or two little spots where I was scraping where there might be some food that was just stuck on there, kind of carbonized on there. But you're not really scraping off your finish. So I use forks in here, metal utensils all the time. The other thing people worry about is scraping in too much iron into their food. So that's the next thing I want to talk about. Cooking on cast iron will lead to iron toxicity. I say sort of half truth misunderstanding because that is true for some people. It's true for a small portion of the population. It's also true for small people in the population. What I mean by that is children, they say especially 3 and younger, are highly susceptible to iron toxicity. Getting too much iron in their diet can make them kind of sick and unhealthy. Now, for the vast majority of the population, that's not a problem. In fact, way more people are anemic or iron deficient. So cooking on cast iron can be very helpful for those people. And the most important thing in here, and where a lot of the misconception comes in on iron toxicity and cooking on cast iron, is it depends on what you're cooking. Most cast iron pan aficionados cook very specific things on their cast iron pans. And we know better than to cook a lot of highly acidic foods in here, not specifically because of the iron increase in those foods, but more specifically because those foods are also very damaging to the nonstick surface that you get, that you've built up. Pretty much any food that's like an acidic food, like you know that it's got some acid in it, is going to increase the amount of iron in the food once you're done cooking significantly. Stick to things that are, proteins and other things that are almost no acid or very little. Studies show that like cooking a steak on here or eggs or some other food like that, they're not just absorbing up all that iron because they don't have the acid etching effect. And plus, if you're cooking those foods in here, you're just creating a lot more work because at that point, it does become hard to maintain your pan because you're constantly eating away at that nice nonstick surface you're trying to maintain. The less time those acidic foods spend in here, the better from a maintenance point of view, and then also if you're worried about getting too much iron. If you love cooking on cast iron and you're like, oh my goodness, I can't cook on cast iron, so what if I get too much iron? Just go get your iron checked. Cast iron is amazing because it heats evenly. That is not true. Anyone who's cooked for any amount of time on cast iron knows that it actually kind of sucks when it comes to that. So what's all the fuss about cast iron then? What's the truth? The truth is, this thing is heavy, it's thick, and it retains heat like a beast. And you want that. Have you ever put something in a pan that's nice and hot, and then you expect it to just sear and keep cooking, and then it like, all the sizzle goes away and it just kind of cools down? Well, that's because no other pan can really hold the heat when you throw something cold on it, like cast iron. So if you got a nice thick steak, you want to just, get that nice sear on there, do it in cast iron, you're going to get the best results because that steak is not cooling this pan down. The other thing that's really great about cast iron, one of the best, probably the best as far as I've seen, at radiating heat. So sometimes when I have a pan like this, and I get my hand like right down next to it and I'm like, oh yeah, it's hot. This pan, I'm like, oh yeah, it's hot. So what does that do? That helps cook your food that's not directly in contact with the surface of the pan quicker. Yeah, like if I cook a really thick omelet or something, it does way better job in here than it does in here. Somehow there is still this myth out there of people freaking out if you put water in your pan and use it to wash your pan. So I'm going to explain to you where these, they're not really myths, but where this misinformation came from. Water is the worst enemy to iron. We all know this. It creates rust. So there's a natural tendency to say, why would I put water on iron? It's just going to rust. Well, if you don't dry it off after you wash it and run it in the sink with water on it, then yeah, you shouldn't be washing your pan with water if you don't take the time to dry it off because you're going to end up with rust. Now, when it comes to soap, the reason why this misconception of soap has passed on is because for many, many years, soap contained lye. It will break down your seasoning surface. But your modern dish detergents don't have lye in them. And even, the brands that are designed specifically say removes grease and oil, they're not going to remove the oil you used to season your pan. And here's why. It's no longer oil if you've done it right. If it's coming off, you didn't do it right. That's all I'm saying. Because you use the oil, you put that super thin coating on there, then you try and wipe as much of it off, you heat it up to that smoke point, and what it does at that point is it polymerizes. And I'm no scientist, but my understanding is it becomes a plastic-like material. It's very durable, very resilient, and definitely resistant to soap and water. Is it safe to scrub the surface of your pan? Yes, it is. But it depends on what you're scrubbing it with. If you're scrubbing it with sandpaper, you're gonna have to re-season it. Now, I use this little guy, I'll put it down here. This is kind of a soft bristle brush. I mean, these aren't super hard. So this is fairly soft. These are pretty common. You can buy them at probably almost any grocery store. And I will actually scrub this with that, with soap and water. The other thing, and probably one of the most common things people do when they really need to give the pan a good scrubbing, is just to dump some salt in there and then use a rag and just scrub it using the salt. Because the salt will break down into powder before it damages your seasoning surface. So salt is a really good one to use as well. Okay, so the last misunderstanding, myth, or whatever you want to call it, that I want to talk about is one that I feel like I've contributed to greatly. And probably that shouldn't be something I'm bragging about. But that is that you don't need to season a brand new cast iron pan if it comes pre-seasoned. And the reason why I say I contributed to that, because if you've seen my other video, I show you how to cook an egg on a brand new pan without having to seasoning it first. And it worked, it cooked. But that does not mean that I'm anti-seasoning a new pan. That's a misconception from that video. What I'm saying is that modern day cast iron pans, most brands, come with some seasoning on there to give you a head start. And it's a pretty good seasoning, at least based on my little tiny test. Some people say, well, it's because I used a lot of oil in there. That's fine. The point is I was able to cook an egg without having to wait a week or season or cook bacon or whatever. I was able to just pop it up, the sticker off, wash it, and cook an egg in it. But that doesn't mean that they don't need to be seasoned. So those are the facts and myths and misinformations I wanted to talk about. I'm sure there are plenty others out there that I skipped or I missed. If you have some more useful tips or information about using cast iron you'd like to share, please leave a comment below. If you think some of the things I said or all of the things I said are completely wrong, please put it in the comments below. I have been known to make mistakes or say things incorrectly. If you're interested in really delicious recipes that are not only fantastic tasting, but they're also really good for you and leave you feeling great, then subscribe to this channel, because that's what we do, is we try and eat healthy and be happy. All right, everyone, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next video.